Hey, I was thinking about inversions today, triad inversions, and also like bigger chords like major 7 or minor 7. And something occurred to me that I don't know why, but I don't think it's ever really struck me this way about the way that we study them and play them on the guitar. So I wanted to share it with you because I realized that some of you might also be confused about inversions, the way that we study them, and play them, and name them. So the thought that really hit me today was how different inversions are when we're talking about starting from close position triads versus open or spread triads, and closed position seventh chords versus drop 2 or drop 3. Let me show you what I mean. So at the most basic level, before we even get to a triad, like here's a 2-note shape. It's just, we could say it's an interval. From C to E is some kind of interval. It happens to be a major third. If we invert them, what that means is we're taking the lower note and we're moving it up an octave. So this note, the E, doesn't go anywhere, but this C goes from here to here. And now we've got this. This is a minor 6th interval, and it is an inversion of this major third, right? So the lowest note goes up an octave, and that kind of thing is also true if we play a C major triad here. We can take this C and move it up an octave to here. And if we want to keep the E and the G where they were, at least in sound, we have to move where they are on the guitar to over here. And the reason we have to do that is because this note is now occupying the first string, so we don't have the first string anymore. So we're going to move these 2 notes here, and we could say that that is a first inversion C major triad. You could also do the same thing if we were starting with this C major triad. It might be a little easier to see that way, actually, because we're going to move this note from here to here, and these 2 don't have to even change strings. They can just stay right where they are. So that's root position C major, first inversion C major. And if you wanted to get to the second inversion, you would repeat the process. Now E needs to go up an octave, and G and C need to stay the same place in sound, but again, now we're going to have to move them up the guitar, up the fretboard, and now we have this. So this is root position, not an inversion, but part of the inversion conversation. So root position, first inversion, second inversion. Going back to that interval thing, we can only invert it once, because if we do the same inversion again, we wind up with E on top and C on the bottom, which is an octave from here. And just to be clear, typically we don't talk about inversions of intervals, but I started there because I thought it would be easier to see than starting with triads. Now let's go to 7th chords, and this is where it really starts to change. If we have this C major 7, C, E, G, B, okay, if we want to move C up an octave but leave E, G, B intact, we could go E, G, B, and put the C up here. Of course, that's not really playable. I mean, maybe. You could do it this way with the open B string. And then the next one from there would be to move the E up an octave, so then you get G, B, C, E. Also, not that easy to play. Not impossible, but not easy to play. But in each of these, that same principle applies. We're moving the lowest note up one octave. So we get root position, first inversion, or it could be there, second inversion. Second inversion always has the fifth of the chord on the bottom. First inversion always has the third of the chord on the bottom. And if we kept going, we'd eventually get, let's see how that would go. So B, another impossible chord, B, C, E, G. Can't even really do it. So I'm playing the B with this finger. And with the seventh on the bottom, that is the third inversion. So root position, root on the bottom, first inversion, third on the bottom, second inversion, fifth on the bottom, third inversion, seventh on the bottom. But at the top of this, I was saying, what if we had open or spread triads, or if we had drop voicings? And that changes the way that we're going to proceed with inversions. So if we started with this C, this is a spread out triad, meaning spread out or open voice triad just means the notes aren't as close together as they could be. There's a gap you can see between the G and the E. So we're not going alphabetical C, E, G, but we're going C, G, E. So we could call this an open voice C major triad or spread C major triad. If we want to invert it and we follow what we were doing with the other examples, and we just move this C up an octave, then we get this, and it's no longer a spread triad. Now all of the voices are within one octave. That's what makes it a close position or close position triad. This is an open, this is closed. But they have a different character. So to invert this, it's a different process. What we actually want to do is just move each note to the next available note in the chord. So C goes up to E, G goes up to C, and E goes up to G. So the inversion of this is not this, but is this. You see that? And now we've got the third on the bottom, so that makes this a first inversion C major spread or open triad. And then again, E will go up, each note goes up to the next chord tone. So E goes up to G, C goes up to E, and G goes up to C. So we could play that here. We could also play it up here. There's other ways to grab it as far as where it lays on the fretboard, but since this is just a 12 fret guitar, it's a nice place to go. So root position, first inversion, second inversion. And similarly, if we started here, which is a drop 2 voicing, to invert that, we're not just going to move C up an octave, but we're actually going to take each of the four notes, C, G, B, E, and move each of them up to the next chord tone. So C goes up to E, G goes up to B, B goes up to C, and E goes up to G. So we wind up with this. That's a first inversion, drop 2, C major 7 voicing with the third on the bottom. Okay. To get to the next inversion, the second inversion, again, just follow the chord tones. E goes up to G, B goes up to C, C goes up to E, and G goes up to B. So we wind up with this. I'm doing this as a double stop, but you could do it with two different fingers, of course. So that's second inversion, fifth on the bottom, C major 7, drop 2 voicing. And the last one, I'm going to run out of frets and neck here, but G would go up to B, C would go up to E, E would go up to G, and B would go up to C. So I'm going to play it down here. could imagine the same thing up here. Okay, so different process when you're talking about closed triads. Inversion means you move the lowest note up an octave. For spread out triads or drop 2 or drop 3 or any kind of voicing other than, you know, this kind of thing that's just alphabetical, C, E, G, B, right up the chord within less than an octave here actually. That we could do literally the original inversion process. But for any of like this kind of C major 7 or this kind of C major 7, or this kind of C major 7, or this kind of C major, or this kind of C major, or this kind of C major. Any of those, we're going to follow each chord tone up to the next available chord tone on the same string if you can, but sometimes you can't, so we have to reconfigure. So does that make sense? I hope so.